Welcome everyone. We're going to be getting started here soon. People are streaming in. I see some familiar names in the audience. We're going to be offering interpretation today, live in Spanish and Vietnamese. And our interpreters today will be Marie, she'll be interpreting in Spanish, and Jacqueline in Vietnamese. If you'd like to join the interpretation channel, you may do so by pressing interpretation at the bottom of your screen. Okay. Looks like hopefully everyone's in by now, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. We will be posting links to our translated presentation in the Q&A shortly, if you'd like to follow along in another format. If you're representing an organization today, it'd be really helpful for us if you could rename yourself with your organization in your title, should you so choose to. It's not a requirement. Just wanted to go over some Zoom rules for today. There will be some opportunities to have Q&A. We encourage you to ask questions in the Q&A itself, and we'll also have opportunities later in the presentation to raise your hand and answer questions live as well. We will let you know when that time is appropriate. And also to note, we'll be recording today's presentation, and we'll be posting the meeting publicly in the future on our webpage, www.vta.org/Central Bikeway. All right, great. Again, just some functionality today. If you need to raise your hand during the Q&A later in the meeting, someone will be calling on you, so you can press the raise hand function and someone will let you know when it's time to speak. And then please, again, feel free to use your Q&A functionality throughout the meeting. We'll have people on our team collecting those questions and aggregating them in the background, and we'll be help moderating the discussion during our breaks for today. So we really hope to get through everyone's questions today, and I think we'll have enough time to do that. So again, thank you for your time today, attendees. We really appreciate it. We're really excited to share with you the Central Bikeway today. These are some of the key members of our team. My name's Brent Purse. I work for VTA. I'm the project manager from the VTA side.
I'm Emily Duchamp. Hi, everybody. I am a principal with Alta Planning and Design, and we are the consultant team supporting VTA and the project partners. So I'm the project manager supporting that. So thanks for joining today.
Jackie, Sarah, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, I could go ahead and introduce myself. So hello, everybody. My name is Jackie Franco. I am a co-founder and owner of Meta LLC, and we are helping on this project with outreach and really making sure that our communities who, are hard to reach show up and get there on this project. And I apologize for not having a background. I'm too pale and I look blue.
And my name is Sarah Jeitlein. I'm with the Guadalupe River Park Conservancy. I'm their volunteer coordinator and also work on special projects such as the Central Bikeway study. Much like Meta, we are helping with outreach and engagement, and we're excited to be a part of this study.
And you all are going to see some other happy faces today presenting to you as well. Donnie on our team will be giving part of the presentation. And another member of our team, Libby, will be helping with Q&A. We also have some other really important partners with us today. We have members from the city of Santa Clara. We have Carol, who's a key project partner. We have Ben and Ellen from the county. And I'm not seeing any of our city of San Jose partners today, but we have members of the Bike Coalition on the call as well that are assisting with outreach. We have Mui. Oh, and there's John. John has joined us from the city of San Jose today as well. And then our outreach lead is also assisting today. Karen is a key member of our team and a few other members of her staff as well to help listen to your questions and concerns today. So we have Mononami and Deanna as well from our team. So we look forward to sharing with you our presentation today. These are the key partners working on the Central Bikeway. This is really a multi-jurisdictional effort. Planning bike corridors in the county takes a lot of effort from a lot of different agencies and peers and from the public all working together. And while VTA is helping lead the project today, we're working very closely with San Jose, the county, Caltrans, who's also our funding partner, and the city of Santa Clara to help deliver a vision for you all today. So we're going to go over a few things today. We're going to recap where we've been. So we're going to share some of the outreach we've collected to date from our first round back in the fall. Hopefully some of you were able to attend, but if you're not, you'll get to learn a little bit about where we've come from. And then the really exciting stuff we're going to be sharing with you are 3 alternatives. These are the alternatives that we're currently studying now and collecting feedback on, and we'll eventually be selecting a preferred alternative sometime this summer. And we really hope to have a good amount of time today that we've reserved to hear from you as well. So your questions, your concerns, your comments.
So we've also done a lot of engagement, as mentioned before. So our engagement principles throughout this process to actively reach underrepresented communities, to build trust and respect with the community, to make it relevant. You speak, we listen, and don't lose sight of joy.
I really like joy. That's my favorite one. You'll all hear me talk about joy a lot today. All right. So we do have some questions for you today. Sarah, did you want to share why we collect information from people?
Yes, I do. I was muted. So VTA collects demographic information to help make informed decisions during the project planning and transit service delivery. For example, we may adjust our outreach strategy for the Central Bikeway if the information collected is not representative of users and population in the study area. So this information is always optional, and it's also kept private.
We're going to have a few polls throughout the meeting today to keep you all interested, and this will be the first one. I think we'll have a total of 7 today. So just look for that pop up on your screen, or if you're joining today on a mobile device, the poll will also pop up on your mobile device. It will take the full screen during the time that you take the poll.
And then after each poll, we'll give you just maybe 2 more seconds to vote here, and then Libby can go ahead and end it, and everybody will get to see the results as we share them with everybody.
Yeah, so it looks like we were asking, how old everyone is here. It looks like we have people from 18 to 74. We have women and men here as well, and a variety of different races.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing today. It looks like we've had a few more people join today since we kicked off the meeting. So I just wanted to let everyone know one more time before we dive in that we are offering interpretation today in our interpretation channel. So if you would like Spanish or Vietnamese interpretation, you can press interpretation at the bottom of your screen. All right, why don't we go ahead and get started?
Okay, and I also want to remind folks that you can look in the Q&A box under the open and answered questions for links to download the PowerPoint we're sharing today in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Chinese. And then throughout the presentation, we'll also be sharing links on how to take the survey and find out more about the project. So you can keep your eye on the Q&A box there.
All right, we've come a long way. So we have a great bicycling culture in the county today, and we're really fortunate to have a lot of bicycle facilities today. You know, it's pretty astounding when you see a number like 800 miles of bikeways spread throughout the county. Many of those are high quality multi-use paths, many of them along our creek corridors. This idea of a bicycle superhighway network came from VTA's countywide bike plan, which was a board adopted document in 2018. And so we've been kind of iterating and continuing to think about how we would want to create or implement a bicycle superhighway one day. We really envision it as a high quality, low stress facility that connects you across the county. So simultaneous to working on Central Bikeway, we're also working on kind of a very high level countywide implementation plan. This shows an image of potential corridors or a network of bicycle corridors, superhighways that could eventually one day maybe connect you across the county. We've identified 12 potential candidate corridors and are working with all of our member agency jurisdictions across the county to get feedback from them. Again, these are really high quality, joyful, happy facilities that connect you to places that you need to go and want to go in the county. And they also build on really the existing core trail network that we have. Many of those trail networks go north and south throughout the county. But what we found in our bike plan in 2018 from feedback from you all is that we really lack east-west connections in the county. And that's where we really feel that Central fills a gap. And it's one of the reasons why we chose to work on the Central Bikeway corridor between Santa Clara and San Jose first. So here's a map of our study area. The study area has really high quality connections to existing transit facilities at Lawrence Station on the left side of the graphic, at Santa Clara Caltrain Station in the center of the graphic there, with VTA's light rail along First Street and along Capitol in Northeast San Jose, and also the newly opened Berryessa Station, which if you have not been to, it's a beautiful facility. I encourage everyone to visit it and check it out. And then we also have great trail corridors as well. So the San Tomas Aquino Trail, the Guadalupe Trail, and the future Coyote Creek Trail. In our first round of outreach, we really had conversation with the community about the type of vision that they would like to see for Central. And we came up with this vision statement to help guide us. So we really see a bicycle superhighway as something that will provide a joyful, continuous, connected, and comfortable bikeway between Santa Clara and North San Jose. Remember joyful, because it's supposed to be something that makes you happy. It's not just about getting there or going to a place as well. We're really driven by these 7 goals, and we've iterated this over time. I think as a project team and early on, we started with 5, and based on feedback and more discussion, we increased those to 7. These 7 goals are the items that we'll be using to help evaluate our project and the 3 alternatives that we'll be walking you through today. So we've done a lot of our early planning work. This is work that includes looking at our partners' existing bike plans. Both cities have recent bike plans in Santa Clara and San Jose. The county is actually just getting kicked off on their own active transportation plan at a countywide level, and then VTA has our own bike planning efforts as well. So we've looked at all those plans and other planning work and programs in the study area to kind of help us create some of the initial corridors and our project vision. And we talked about some of those things last fall with you all. Today, we've moved a little bit further. So we're kind of at that second bullet today, where we're going to be sharing with you 3 alternatives. This is a really key part of the project, really key junction where your input really matters and will really help us focus on preference as we begin to kind of further develop the study. Our eventual goal with the Central Bikeway study is to create kind of some concept plans that will help us implement the project in the future and hopefully seek additional funding. to fund the project after it's completed.
So we want to give you a moment to kind of gather your thoughts on what you've heard thus far and have a little Q&A break. So if you do have questions, feel free to put them into that Q&A box. That there's an icon at the bottom of your screen, and we can address those. So the link doesn't go to a PowerPoint, and we will be posting the correct link for you in there. So that was one question. Any other?
Yes, Sarah, could you just read what the question is specifically in case there's anyone receiving interpretation?
Sure. The question specifically is that link doesn't go to a PowerPoint.
It's a comment question. Thanks.
Yes.
Yeah. So the link, I believe, takes you to the VTA project website, and there should be links to download each of those presentations. We'll see if we can post those individual links to download the PDF.
Great. Okay. Well, if we don't have any other questions posted for our team, we'll go ahead and move on to the next section.
Yeah, so, we wanted to share a little bit about what we learned during the first round of community engagement. And so since we do have two of our community-based organization partners with us today at this meeting, I wanted to give Sarah and Jackie both, a minute or so to talk about some of the engagement efforts that they've been doing since the fall.
Sure. So I'll go ahead and go first. So the Guadalupe River Park Conservancy is most active on social media via their Facebook page. And we've been actively posting about the Central Bikeway leading up to events and leading up to different community engagement opportunities such as surveys and the like. What you see there on the left side of your screen is one of our more recent Facebook posts. We've also been active in engaging our membership to the Conservancy via email. And also everybody who receives our e-newsletter has been getting notifications in regards to Central Bikeway happenings. And lastly, we've also, we have close connections and ties with the San Jose State University Urban Planning Department. And we have been involving them in some of the visioning for this by directing them also to the community surveys and to community meetings as they arise, as well as just generally kind of talking about the Bikeway to the student body and also the professors that are within the program, as this is a hot topic in urban planning.
Thanks, Sarah. Jackie, can you share a little bit about what Meta has been working on?
Yeah, for sure. So Meta, first of all, it's a cooperative owned business with deep connections and roots in East San Jose. But we do work with other communities all over San Jose. And I think a lot of the work we've been doing has really been like in-person outreach and meeting people and residents where they are. That includes food distributions, diaper distributions, any place or community event where people are already showing up and have a connection or trust in that space. We've been showing up and doing outreach and letting people know about this project and the importance of having their voice included. Along with that, I would say this second round, we're also focusing a lot on virtually kind of learning from our partners, social media, but also showing up to virtual community events, because we know that many people are still hesitant to go out in person. And so we want to make sure that we're covering both those that are going out and those that are deciding to stay home, to make sure that they know about the project, the timeline, and just be involved in the decision making.
Thank you. Thanks. So I should share a little bit about who we heard from during the last round of meetings. So in the fall, we hosted 2 virtual community meetings with a total of 66 attendees. And we also hosted an online open house survey in 4 languages, which had almost 1,000 visits and collected about 1,700 comments on our mapping activities. The study area is very diverse, and we compared the racial groups who completed the survey with census data in the study area. And 41% of survey respondents were white, which is really an overrepresentation compared to the 36% of the population being white in the study area. And we saw an underrepresentation from Asian and Hispanic populations with only 20% and 17% compared to the 46 and 24% of the population reported in the census. So this round of engagement, we're going to be working closely with Sarah, Jackie, and their teams to help with the outreach and engagement efforts in the community so we can really better represent the people who live in the study area. So we heard that safety was really a top priority goal for the Central Bikeway, and we're taking that into consideration when developing and evaluating alternatives. That's followed by community desired projects, sustainable mobility, access, and providing joy as sort of the next tier of priorities. We also heard that personal safety from traffic, bikeways not connecting with desired destinations, a lack of secure bike parking, uncomfortable bikeways, and personal safety concerns related to things like crime, people living outside, and darkness were all barriers that really prevented people from biking more often. And so as we continue to develop ideas for the Central Bikeway, these are some of the barriers we're really trying to overcome. We also collected information about challenging areas, and really the top 2 challenges we heard were related to an insufficient infrastructure or lack of bikeways or lack of protected bikeways, as well as challenging intersections. We collected information on the destinations that you wanted to reach by bicycle. So this is a great collection of destinations, and we'll be using these to evaluate how well the various alternatives connect to these community desired destinations. And finally, community members were asked to draw their preferred route for the Central Bikeway. And you can see that we had a lot of routes drawn, and there was preferences along Heading, Taylor, and Penitentia Creek in San Jose. Over in the west, El Camino Real, Monroe, and Central Expressway to the Guadalupe River Trail were also priority areas. So, we use this community feedback to help develop the alternatives that we're sharing with you today and asking for your feedback. So Donnie is going to share a little bit more about the process we went through in developing these alternatives.
Great, thanks, Emily. So we started developing the alternatives by focusing on corridors, looking at street and trail corridors throughout the study area. We then looked at how to connect those into cohesive and continuous 8-mile bike superhighway routes throughout the study area. And then most recently, we've been working to refine and identify 3 alternatives that best respond to the project goals, stakeholder input, and public feedback. In a little more detail, we studied first the major corridors that were identified in local plans, shown on this map. We then explored additional corridors that were feasible, such as the Caltrain corridor and the 880 and 101 freeway corridors. We identified additional corridors that help to close critical gaps between these larger corridors, and combined, use that to create a network that we were going to use for developing a bike superhighway. We then use this network to compare it against the community identified destinations from the first round of outreach to see which network parts best connected to these destinations. And we also overlaid it with the community identified routes to see which ones best aligned with the community identified routes from the first round of outreach. And all that led to developing 3 alternatives that best responded to both the project goals and the community output from the first round of outreach. Throughout the alternative development process, we explored which bikeway types were going to be feasible and desirable for each alternative. And so on this slide, you see 3 bikeway types that were most highlighted by the community in the first round of outreach. They also represent the vast majority of the bikeway types we're proposing for the 3 alternatives. On the left side, you have protected bikeways. These are on-street bikeway types that feature a buffer between the bikeway and the vehicle parking or travel lanes. For Central Bikeway, we are considering both one-way protected bikeways, shown on the left, and two-way protected bikeways, which is shown in the center. For the third primary bikeway type that we're exploring is a trail, shown on the right, which is off-street and fully separated from vehicles, and most commonly located along creek or rail corridors. And each alternative is made up of multiple bike types. So on the following slides, you're going to see protected bikeways shown as red lines and trails shown as green lines for reference. And on the next slide, we're going to jump into those 3 alternatives. So the first of the 3 alternatives we call the Walsh Wizard. It's unique in being the only one of the 3 alternatives that passes north of the San Jose International Airport. 78% of this alternative is protected bikeway and 22% of it is trail. Of the 3 alternative, it is the third quickest or the slowest in travel time from one end to the other. And the key destinations along it include Lawrence Station, the airport, Japantown, and Berryessa BART Station. The next alternative is the trail trackway. You'll notice this one has a lot more green color on it. 94% of this alternative is off-street trail facility, and only about 6% is protected bikeway. Of the alternatives, it's the second quickest from end to end. And the key destinations include Lawrence and Santa Clara Caltrain stations, Santa Clara University, and Berryessa BART Station. And the third alternative is the shortliner. You'll see a strong contrast between the previous one and this one. This one features 97% protected bikeway, so almost exclusively on-street bikeway types. Of the 3, it features the quickest travel time and connects to Santa Clara Caltrain Station, Santa Clara University, Japantown, and Berryessa BART Station.
Thanks for introducing those alternatives, Donnie. You can see that Donnie shared some trade-offs in travel time and typologies. And so we wanted to stop here and take a poll to hear some preferences for you on some of these trade-offs. So we're going to launch 2 polls where we want to know what would help you choose riding on the Central Bikeway over using another mode. And there's going to be 2 polls. So the first poll will look at trade-offs between a route with a short travel time or a route that connects to more destinations. So Libby, you can go ahead and launch that poll, and then everyone will have an option to tell us your preference. So is it either a route that is quick with a short travel time or a route that would connect to more destinations? You may also have a different reason. So you can type that in the Q&A box. Let's see, just to let everybody know that the question number 1 is asking for trade-offs about travel time and connecting to destination. And then the second question number 2 on this poll is asking the same question with just different trade-offs. So we want to know for question number 2, if you prefer a protected on-street bikeway or an off-street trail, and which one of those options would help you choose riding on the Central Bikeway over using another mode. So again, you can choose a different option, and you can put your response in the Q&A box if you'd like to share more information about what that other option is. I think we'll keep the voting open for maybe 10 more seconds, 10, 15 more seconds. And again, it's the same question, but just comparing, question number 1 is comparing trade-offs related to travel time and connecting to destinations. And question number 2 is about comparing trade-offs in the bikeway typology, an protected on-street bikeway or an off-street trail. So let's see the results.
So it looks like for the first trade-off between travel time and connecting to destinations, that 60% of people prefer a route that connects to more destinations, with only 30% preferring the shorter travel time and 10% having a different reason. For the trade-offs between the on-street versus off-street trail, again, it was a 60-30 split for preferring an off-street trail, and then 10% with a different option.
That's great
Great.
feedback,
Thanks,
y'all.
Libby. So we have another poll. This time, so before we launch the poll, I just want to let everybody know that this one will look a little different because it's in 3 languages. So please, each question is in an individual language. So the first one will be English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. So please answer the question in your own language, and then you can choose skip on the other languages. So go ahead and launch the poll. So some alternatives may take more time to build. So we would like to know if you prefer a bikeway that can be built more quickly using the street network, or a bikeway that may require more time to build and provide off-street trail corridors, or maybe you prefer a different option. So again, please vote in your preferred language, and then before the blue skip button will show up, Zoom poll actually makes you, make an individual choice. So there is that skip option on the other languages. So please make sure if you're answering in one language, just to choose the skip option so that you can submit your answers. So I see this time around, we have almost half of the attendees. We have half of the attendees responding. So I'll keep it open for a few more minutes. Again, these are the same questions, just in different languages. And you'll have to make sure to hit skip, select the skip option on the other languages that you didn't answer in before the blue submit button will be highlighted. And then you can submit your answers. Okay, we have 70% of the participants voted. So I think we'll go ahead and share the results.
Great. It's a little harder to look at this all together with since it's spread out between 3 languages, but it looks like we have a preference for a bikeway that would require more time and provide off-street trail corridors. And then when kind of adding them all up together, it looks like they might be fairly evenly split when we look at all of the different languages together. So we have a lot of opinions here.
Thank you, everyone.
Great. So today we're sharing 3 alternatives as a whole that Donnie described, but we really want to hear from you how to knit these alternatives together to best meet your needs. So we'll be looking at the alternatives in 3 areas: in Santa Clara, around the airport, and San Jose. And so you can kind of, if you squint your eyes, you can imagine that within these 3 areas, the preferred alternative could be a combination of these routes in between the areas. So we have another poll that we're interested in which areas you would ride most often. So on this poll, you can choose as many areas that you ride, or you can choose none of them. So we'd love to hear from you all about the areas you'd ride most often. Easier question.
Don't let the pretty colors distract you.
Yeah. it's not always easy to answer a question about trade-offs because, you know, we want it all. Okay, we'll give folks just 10 more seconds on this poll. Okay, let's go ahead and see the results.
So it looks like we have Santa Clara wins with about 80% of folks. But it looks like both the airport and San Jose routes would still be heavily used by people who are here today.
Yeah. And the good news is that folks are going to ride in this. Nobody's not riding in this area, so that's great.
And for, you know, projects long as these, we plan over a long corridor, but we envision users not always necessarily using the whole route itself. So it's you know, very likely that people will only use segments, which is why we're going to be talking a lot about segments as we move forward.
Yeah. Well, this is a good time to take another Q&A break. And here, maybe Sarah, you can let us know if folks have sort of general questions about what we've presented so far.
Sure, we have a few questions here, and I'm sorry if I say your name wrong, but Atisha would like to know, what is the key purpose of the bikeway? Is it connecting transit to transit, or homes to transit, or recreation? Just trying to understand the end goal.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Maybe a little bit of all of that, actually. So one of the reasons why the study area for Central was selected is because it does have high quality connections to transit. But there are also trade-offs we need to think about too, because some places in the study area have more access to destinations that we've heard from the community about than other alternatives do. Ultimately, we want to provide a high quality, low stress facility for people so that they can bike more. That is one of the ultimate goals of a project like this. And when we collect feedback, we want to make sure that we're envisioning and creating a project that is representative of a facility that people will want to use so that they can get out of their cars more and have other options available to them to bike, to walk, and to move and have more freedom in the county.
All right, and then Kurt is asking, is there money currently available to fund this central bikeway?
Thank you, Kurt, for your question. We only have funding currently to fund this feasibility and concept study, and that will give us some preliminary engineering plans. That's really key because having documentation like that allows us to go be very competitive for other funding sources to hopefully fund the build out of the project with our partners in the future. But we do not have money currently for construction or finishing the engineering at this time. But I'm not giving up.
And an anonymous attendee is asking, what criteria do you use to measure, define joy? Is it noise, clean air?
I'm so glad someone asked about joy. No, I think I got it.
Okay.
So I talked a little bit about our 7 goals, which are also our primary criteria. And for joy, we're looking at things like access to open space. So parks in your community or existing trails, places that are outside. We're also looking for, when we look at the alternatives, which ones maybe expand your choices more. And, you know, something that makes a bikeway really joyful is also how hard you exert yourself when you ride on it, right? So do you want a bikeway that has a lot of hills or challenges, or do you want something that's pleasant and has grades that aren't so steep? So with joy, we also look at the effort that you have to put into bicycling over the route as well. And Emily, I don't know if you wanted to add, you know, talk about noise or the other criteria or the other part of the question.
So, you know, those are certainly factors too. I would say in terms of, we're not actually thinking directly about air quality right now, but we do have the sustainable mobility goal is really tied to looking at reducing vehicle miles traveled and overall regional air quality improvements. But Brent, you did a great job answering those. But those, you know, sort of expanding access to open space, providing lower level of effort to riders and reducing stress, you know, are the main drivers and the criteria for that joy goal.
All right.
And is there time for one more or no?
Sure, let's take one more quick one, and then we'll move forward.
So the last one, Tom is asking, does the protected on-street bikeway have provisions to keep pedestrians and others not on bikes out of the bikeway?
Also a great question. So I think it will definitely depend on the type of facility. So a protected on-street bikeway would be designed just for bikes, but some other types of bikeways that we may implement, or we'll show you images of, like on a trail-like setting, could have a space where pedestrians or bikes are next to each other, but definitely a defined space and separate from one another. One of the key aspects of a bicycle superhighway is that you provide primarily dedicated space for bicycles and having separation from cars and pedestrians and buses and all other modes.
Great,
Okay.
Thanks for those questions. Again, there'll be time at the end. We have about 20 minutes at the end of this presentation saved for more Q&A. So we're going to explore the three alternatives in really more detail. So again, we have these three alternatives and we have these three areas. So we're going to sort of dive in now and share more about each of the alternatives within each of the three areas, and then ask your preferences. So this information will really help us understand if we need to knit areas together in different ways to build a bikeway that best meets your needs, like we mentioned previously. So we're going to start in Santa Clara. So if we zoom into the alternatives map through Santa Clara, the green line is the Central Expressway to Caltrain corridor route. The yellow line is on Kiefer Road to Walsh to Martin Avenue, and the purple line is along El Camino Real. So the first alternative here is part of the trail Trackway, and it's along Central Expressway. The Central Bikeway could be a trail located in the center median. So it would be protected from vehicles and provide access at selected intersections. There are very major intersections along this corridor, so we are looking at providing grade separated, so either elevated or maybe a tunnel under, so we're minimizing impacts with vehicle cars driving along the corridor. So this alternative would utilize San Tomas-Aquino Trail to connect south to the Caltrain or railroad corridor, where we're really just starting to explore the feasibility of a rail width trail along the south side of the corridor. So again, this is a corridor where there are future plans, there's existing trains run through here, and it's also future plans to have high-speed rail run through here. And so somebody mentioned noise, so we have determined that there is potentially space and there could be buffers to mitigate some of those other competing impacts from as the corridor changes with its rail use over time. I skipped over one, sorry. So the second alternative is part of the Walsh Wizard, where the Central Bikeway would be a one-way or a two-way protected bikeway, as it's shown in this rendering. And then along El Camino Real is part of the shortliner. And here we're showing a one-way protected bikeway that's really in sync with the El Camino specific plan. So this alternative would remove on-street parking to create a physical buffer between the cars and the bikeway. So we're going to take a minute to do another poll and ask you all to choose your preference. So the first option is the Central Expressway connecting to the Caltrain corridor. The second is along Kuiper Walsh, and the third is along El Camino Real. And if you have other thoughts, or you don't want to choose one of these, or you wish you could choose more, feel free to share those other thoughts in the Q&A box, and we can talk further at the end of the presentation a little bit more about modifications or tweaks or ideas that you may have of knitting these all together in different ways. But this is just a very high level question where we're really forcing you to choose one if you hadn't preferred. But if you have a tie or any other option, feel free to share that in the Q&A box. So we'll go ahead and share the results of the poll.
All right. Well, it looks like we have support for all of them, but El Camino Real has won out with nearly half of you responding, and then Central Expressway Caltrain Rail Corridor is a close second.
Thanks, Libby. It's nice to see that there's some support for all of the options. That people could imagine it being on any of those corridors. Okay, Brent, do you want to guide us around the airport?
Oh, the big challenge. And thanks for your responses. This is always really exciting to see what people think. The airport is a major barrier in the middle of the study area. And so we're really, have to think about whether we go north around the airport or south around the airport. And we wanted to definitely confirm, or we definitely wanted to study an option for both. So we have one option north of the airport using Trimble and a new interchange that VTA is currently building, and the Guadalupe River Trail, and two options south. So Coleman Avenue and Airport Boulevard, and potentially using Caltrans right-of-way, and the El Camino Real, Alameda, and Heading Street further south. So the Trimble Guadalupe River Trail option, I think we could probably go to the next slide, provides a more trail-like experience than the other two. So this would be included in the trail trackway alternative. It would provide separation of bikes and pedestrians along the trail. It does have more limited access points as compared to the other two routes in this segment of the study. The second option to go around the airport would be to the south, using potentially segments of Coleman, and then connecting into the freeway corridor. This alignment would require almost like on and off ramps for bicycles to get into certain parts of the trail-like experience. So we would have grade separations for bicycles to enter challenging parts of this right-of-way. It would also have more limited access. And then the third and final would be using an extension of the El Camino to the Alameda, and eventually heading. So this is the junction between Santa Clara and San Jose. It would be an all on-street protected facility. It would have much more points of access and connect you with more destinations that have been identified as places that the community wants to connect to. Okay, so again, we're going to put a poll up on the screen, and you'll have three options. Again, challenging to pick which ones you'll ride in. We'll give you all a few moments to think about whether you want to go north or whether you want to go south. whether that connects you to where you need to go, to your job, possibly appointments that you have, visit a friend. And think about what kind of experience you want to have when you ride on one of these facilities. Is it joyful? Do you feel safe? What percentage are we at, Libby?
I'll go ahead and end it. We have about 80% of people responding. So let me just share out the results.
Great.
Looks like there's overwhelmingly 65% of people prefer the heading and the Alameda route, with another third preferring either the freeway corridor or Guadalupe River Trail. We're looking at 12% for the river trail and 24% for the freeway corridor.
Yeah, so this is definitely much more lopsided than the previous one. So, you know, according to that, it looks like there's more support, or people can envision riding south of the airport, maybe more than north of the airport. So thank you. We'll move on to the last segment, and I think Donnie, you're going to take this one.
Yep. So for this last segment, we'll be looking at San Jose. And in San Jose, the trail trackway option, which is shown in green, continues following the freeway corridor that Brent talked about, and connects up to Penitentia Creek Trail in the northernmost portion. The other two alternatives, the Walsh Wizard and the Shortliner, both use heading street through the bulk of the central area, and then continues up. They split off near Berryessa BART, and one follows Berryessa Road, and then the other, the Shortliner, follows Mayberry Road. So for the Walsh Wizard option, in the northernmost area, it's following Berryessa Road. For this portion, we'd be looking at a one-way protected bikeway with improved buffers. On this road, there are already class 2 bike lanes. So this would be looking to provide a little more barrier between the cyclists and the cars. The trail trackway is following Penitentia Creek Trail. This would be a widened trail that would provide separated walking path and cycling path. So currently there's a trail running along here, which is heavily used for recreation. And by widening it and provided separate areas for biking and cycling, it would reduce the conflict between trail users. And then the third option, this is the Shortliner, utilizes Mayberry Road. Similar to Berryessa, there are existing class 2 bike lanes along Mayberry. So this would be, again, looking to add a bit of a buffer between the car lanes and where the cyclists would be traveling. And we're going to do one more poll question for San Jose, really focusing in on those northernmost options. So which route do you prefer in San Jose? Is it a protected bikeway on Berryessa Road? Is it an off-street trail along Penitentia Creek? Or is it a protected bikeway along Mayberry Road?
I think Donnie has another calling as a game show host. That was very well done.
Thank you, Brent.
All right.
All right, well,
What do you all think?
10 more seconds. We have a few more people to vote. All righty. So it looks like the Penitentia Creek Trail is the clear winner in this crowd, with nearly 70% of you preferring that. Berryessa Road and Mayberry Road far distant, with 13% and 19% respectively.
Okay. I think this is me. Well, thank you. That was really informative, and you could really see a lot of different variants between the different segments about the type of alternative or experience that people want to have in the audience. If you haven't had chance to participate or perform our survey yet, we would love to collect feedback from you all too on our survey. Before the start of the meeting today, Emily and I were looking at the survey, and we had, I think, over 830 participants already on the survey to date. So please feel free to share that with your networks, with your friends, with your families, so we can collect as much information as possible. All right. So we covered some of the feedback that we got in round 1, and we're collecting additional feedback now on our alternatives. Thank you for your participation in our polls today. We're going to shortly do some more Q&A. And as we take all this feedback, the team's going to come back and start to summarize that feedback and make the modifications and changes that we need to select eventually a preferred alternative. So just one route. Now remember what we said earlier is this final route that we plan to study will most likely be made up of different pieces or segments from the 3 alternatives. And that's really one of the benefits of setting up the plan the way we have. And then we intend to really come back out to you all and share with you what the preferred bikeway alternative would be later this summer. Okay, so we're actually a little bit ahead of schedule, which is amazing. Don't get to say that very often in our line of work. So we're going to have a good opportunity to answer some questions. So I think we'll have some of the team members read some of the written questions first. Maybe we'll take 2 or 3, and then we'll have an opportunity to raise some hands, and you all can ask some questions live as well. And I think we'll go back and forth.
Great. So we're going to start with a question from Alan, who asks, do you keep the growing number of e-bikes in mind? Should cater to this mode too. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great question, Alan. It's something we definitely talk about as a team. I heard similar feedback from VTA advisory committees last week about thinking about e-bike users. And all of the facility types and alignments that we're proposing would allow for e-bikes. I think it would be helpful for us to know maybe more details if you wanted to put them in the Q&A about e-bikes. Are you talking about speed or ability to go longer distances? It might be helpful for us to know how you use an e-bike maybe differently than a normal e-bike. Be helpful.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And I'll chime in to say, you know, so Brent shared, you know, we do understand that e-bike users travel at higher speeds, and we also understand that that means that it expands their reach. And so the access that when we're considering access to the Central Bikeway and looking at the local connections, local other bike routes and bike facilities that connect to the Central Bikeway, we've expanded that to think about to capture a bigger range of potential e-bike users in the future. And the widths that we are looking and planning for the bikeways are, for our you know, on-street bikeways are, you know, beyond minimums, because we do want to be able to, we do understand that in the future there might be other devices that can travel at higher speeds. However, we are still planning for, you know, an active mode and human powered devices. So, you know, so in terms of some of the e-assists and, you know, we're sort of not maxing out a speed limit when we're thinking about the design and plan for these corridors.
Thank you so much, both of you, for that. Emily, you mentioned briefly, connecting to local bikeways. So that actually connects to a question. Atisha had two questions actually that relate to that topic. One specifically around the neighborhood south of the Caltrain tracks. I'm going to read her general question, which is, the places where a trail is proposed alignment, what are the strategies to connect to neighborhoods and create permeability and connections to the trail?
Are you going to take that one, Brent, or would you like me to answer?
Go ahead, you may start. Libby,
Okay, I'll
Libby
start,
was lobbing it your way.
Great. Yeah, so one of the goals is access. And so under the access goal, there's a number of criteria that we're looking at to help measure how each of these alternatives would help expand access and connect to people who can use these corridors. So, for example, we're looking at how the local bikeways connect into each of these corridors, and then looking at things like job centers and communities of concern and the community preferred destinations. And we're seeing how many of those can be reached following, lower stress or easy rideable local bikeways to get you there. So we're looking at not just connections along the corridors themselves, but also how we could connect by enhancing those, by utilizing those local networks that feed into the central bikeway. Anything you want to add to that, Brent?
No, I think that's great. All right, why don't we take one more written question and then we'll raise some hands. And then we'll come back to it.
Great. So we have a question from Hisham that says, how will you create a space for the biking lane along the roads? Is it mostly taking from driving lanes, parking, or sidewalks?
That's a great question. I think it could be all of the above or none of the above, depending on the location. So the study in some areas is identifying locations where we may need to reallocate space. So either remove parking to put a protected bike lane there, or just upgrade the existing buffered facility in some cases. On other alternatives, we may be changing the street, like on Kiefer Walsh, where we could potentially envision a two-way cycle track. That may include reducing a lane in certain parts of the alignment or changing the makeup of the street. So it depends on the context and what is around the bikeway. Okay. Are there any daring attendee members of the public who would like to raise their hand? You can do so by clicking the raised hand feature, and I can call on you to ask your question. I don't see any raised hands yet, so maybe we'll take another written question, Libby.
There's one raised hand.
Oh, I see one. Charles, go ahead and unmute yourself.
I was just wondering what your timeline is for all of this.
Thanks, Charles. So our timeline to wrap up this initial study will be by February of 2022. Go ahead.
When do you envision the actual trail setup or the pathways?
That's great. I don't think we know that specifically yet, but as part of this initial study, we're going to be diving a lot deeper into implementation and how we could actually fund these types of projects and who would deliver them. We don't know that question yet either, but that could also change the timeline slightly. Maybe the city or VTA could pool our resources on certain segments Or maybe our city partners or the county will work on certain segments alone, and VTA may work on a different type of segment. So I don't think we know that yet, unfortunately, but we hope to have maybe some near-term, medium-term, and long-term goals in the final plan that we can focus on certain elements. All right, anyone else would like to raise their hand? All right, would you like to read off another one, Libby?
Yeah, great. So we have a question from Tony, specifically about one of the alternatives. So he asks, could the El Camino option be routed in the center of the street? There are so many driveways that bike paths on the right-hand side of the traffic lanes would not be so safe.
Yeah, it's a great comment and question. It's one we've heard in previous rounds of outreach. We've heard it in talking to the community. There's a lot going on El Camino, particularly driveways and how they interact with the street and with potentially a future bike lane. One of the ways that we have planned this project is to make sure that it's compatible with existing planning efforts from our partners. And so the Santa Clara bike plan identifies potentially protected facilities on the sides of the street, but not in the median at this time. And we have done some coordination with cities further north along the El Camino as well, Sunnyvale, and we've received some feedback from Mountain View and other cities, and their plans as well identify potentially protected bikeways on the side of the street and not in the middle of the street in the median. Emily, did you want to talk about driveways specifically, or maybe some things we can do to help with those or to acknowledge those in our efforts?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. So, yeah, we understand the reality of all the conflict points as you try and ride down El Camino Real. And so some of the design strategies we're thinking about as ways to mitigate that are looking at an elevated bikeway or sidewalk level protected bikeway to sort of give more priority to people walking and biking at each of the driveway crossings, using various, pavement marking strategies to highlight those conflict zones as you move through the corridor, and certainly making sure that sight lines are very clear. And, there also could be some potential for considering driveway consolidation. So there's a number of strategies to continue to dive into if El Camino Real is really the preferred route moving forward.
All right, great. I see that, Ken, you have your hand raised. Would you like to go ahead and ask your question or provide a comment? And I'd just like to note too, anyone raising your hand, if you'd like us to maybe go to a particular slide to help with your question or comment, just let us know.
Ken, go ahead and hit unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Yep, we can hear you.
You're breaking
Okay.
up a little bit, but go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, say, I used to be on the City of Santa Clara Bike and Bike and Pedestrian Committee
Welcome.
for a few years. I have a question. I'm quite aware of the City of Santa Clara, the geography of the communities of concern that has come up a couple times. And I'm sorry I didn't catch the earlier part of this presentation. But having lived in the city for 30 or 40 years, my question is, the outline of the communities of concern includes everything north of the railroad tracks up to about Central, I think. And there's, as far as I know, there's very little housing in there that people actually live in that section of the city. There's a little section near Lafayette, just north of the railroad track, just right next to Lafayette Street. And having looked at the definition of communities of concern, the definition has like 6 talking points, and it mostly talks
That's
about
correct.
residents, people living in that area. So my question is, and I did spend a little more time trying to define, looking online, what is the definition of it and how people review and look at what needs to be improved in these areas. So my question would be, first of all, shouldn't we be focusing on the people that actually live in that area? And let me finish with this. There is a prism, a geographical location south of the railroad tracks, and it includes City Hall and some very dense housing there, multi-story housing that's defined between Scott Boulevard, that would be east of Scott, north of El Camino Real, and south of the railroad tracks. And it's almost all housing. So that portion seems to be has an identity that is different from all of the huge industrial area that is considered a community of concern that is north of the railroad tracks. So this, to me, this distinction would play an important role in determining what improvements need to occur in this area. And because the central project that you're talking about includes the El Camino Real and Central and all that, it brings up questions to me that maybe we need to survey the people in these areas. And I'm talking about the housing, have a survey, and then the industry in that area have a survey to find out if it's their employees that need help. And if so, do they need transit? Do they need cycle paths? Do they need sidewalks? Do we need a new plan for the zoning in that area to include more housing in the industrial section so people don't have to rely on cars, can perhaps walk to work, cycle to work? So maybe we're talking about some land use issues in addition to transportation infrastructure in order to help those folks there. And I'm wondering if you've considered any of those things. And I would start with, we need a survey that would look at the housing, the people who actually live in those areas and along these central area and El Camino, and also look at the industry, have a separate survey for them asking about their employees. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, no, that's really great feedback. Let me try and tackle some of those big thoughts that you provided, and hopefully I can get through them one by one. So you had a comment about community concerns. I think that's a very great observation. So if someone could pull up kind of the whole study area with the 3 alternatives on it, I can maybe speak to that a little bit. For other audience members, Ken was talking about communities of concerns. These are communities that it's a definition used by the Metropolitan Transportation Commission to define communities that are generally underrepresented by investment. These are low-income communities, communities of color, communities that don't have great access to transportation. And one of the reasons why we chose to focus on the central bikeway study area above all of our other potential bike superhighway corridors is because it has 2 significant communities of concerns in it. And one of them is that triangle there in Santa Clara, just to the left of the first black line in North Santa Clara. And the other large community of concerns in San Jose, around the Japantown Heading Street area, Taylor Street area, kind of north central downtown. So we used communities of concerns to actually pick the first kind of project that we were really going to work on with our partners as an agency. That was really defining criteria. Secondly, to help us identify where these 3 alternatives should be and who they should serve, and thinking about access to the future facility, we use communities of concern and where they're located to help inform that. That was kind of our initial tier that we used to develop some of the corridors before we narrowed them down to this 3. And as we move further along in our study, moving from 3 alternatives to 1, we're going to further define access and equity in other ways than we have before. So we're going to use data and feedback from the community that we have available about new users, women who will be using this facility, women that live in the community where they're located, people of color, so Black members of our community, Latino members of our community, where are they located? Do they have access to the study alternatives? It's very important that we connect with those communities, that we reach them, and the feedback from those groups will really help us define what the preferred alternative will be. We want to make sure, we talked about this a little bit earlier, that we're connecting with all of our potential users who live in the study area at the right proportion to one another, to make sure that we have good feedback across all groups. Ken, I think the last thing you talked about too is land uses and kind of the disjointed land uses that we have in some of our cities. It's a challenge in our valley. We have large sections of industrial areas, often separate from commercial or retail centers, often separate from places where people live, either in more dense corridors like you mentioned on El Camino, or in single family neighborhoods. And that's something that we have to look at, and we believe that different segments or different alternatives presented here connect through those different types of land uses. So people in Northeast San Jose, where their primary residences, could access those jobs, or centers in Santa Clara, or vice versa. People that are working in those high commercial areas in Santa Clara could hopefully use this facility to connect to where they live, or to resources, maybe along the El Camino or heading. That was a long answer for a long question, but comments and questions noted. Thank you very much. All right, Libby, did you want to read another question for us in the Q&A? We have about 10 or 15 more minutes as well, you all, so we have time to answer more questions and comments today.
Yeah, so we have, it's not entirely a question, but a comment / question from Adam, who says, regarding the Santa Clara and airport sections, it would appear that the two northern options would serve a very different purpose from the El Camino alternative. So I just wanted to pass that on, see if you had any thoughts or response to that, Brent.
Yeah, they're really in two totally different environments. They travel in really different kinds of places. Ken even kind of mentioned this a little bit in his last question. The Walsh Wizard in orange, yellow here, that travels north around the airport, really goes through a lot of those job centers and potentially sets up users or new users to make connections into North San Jose, either further along the Guadalupe River Trail or other potential future fingers that may extend out into the Golden Triangle, as we call it, our job center in North San Jose. And the southern alternatives really are representative of the feedback that we've heard from the community, which has said we want access to a lot of different places as well, not just jobs or homes. We want to be able to shop, go to our favorite taco truck, go to the library, see grandma, go to the dentist. And a lot of those facilities are not in North Santa Clara and north of the airport. Most of those things that people want to do are along the El Camino or along other segments in San Jose. That's really a major trade-off that we all have to think about. Emily, is there anything you'd like to add? Just kind of a big comparison between the north and southern alignments.
Well, something that we've been talking with the project partners about is just how the central bikeway then continues further west and north into the region. And that, there has been conversations with plans, and we've looked at the plans and talked with Sunnyvale, and how this would tie into. So, you know, although this study is focusing within this, you know, the Santa Clara and San Jose area, and we're trying to tackle these, you know, 8 miles here, it is just a springboard for what's going to happen and setting up future connections to the West. And so, you know, it's, you know, potentially when you're providing comments on the survey, you could also share thoughts about sort of that Western connection as well.
Yeah, so, you know, there's really, we can set new users up further north along Central or further south along El Camino. And in conversations with cities traveling further up the county north into the peninsula, each of these cities has different visions for kind of how they want to build out bicycling. But all cities are kind of working on plans for El Camino, at least some type of protected facility on El Camino right now. Sunnyvale to the west has envisioned some type of protected facility on El Camino, and Mountain View as well, extending even further west from there. But Central also travels through those communities, and it's very direct and has potentially space to provide access for people along Central as well. So there's, again, a trade-off of the type of facility that you would want to ride on. Do you want one that maybe you can be quicker on, like Central, but not have as many places to get in and out of it? Or do you want something that has more destinations, but there are more intersections or conflict points or challenges that you maybe have to guide yourself through?
On that note, Brent, we have a follow-up to what you've just been describing between the different alternatives. Ari is asking, is it possible to go around the airport on both sides, yellow and green/purple? Both seem like good options.
I hear you, Ari. I wish I could pick all of these for the final, but for a preferred alternative, we're just gonna be able to study one route in more detail. But the great thing about this study is we have an idea potentially of what is possible as maybe a parallel facility or an alternative facility. So going north of the airport, one thing that's really important to note is, you know, using public taxpayer dollars from you all who are attending today, we're making a major investment at the De La Cruz Trimble intersection, which will provide a Class 1 path, a connection. We call it the Loop de Loop, as my colleague Lauren, who's on the call, has named it, connecting you to the Guadalupe River Trail. So that project is funded. It will be getting built within the next few years. If the Central Bikeway chooses to go north, we'll be using that facility. If we don't choose to go north with Central Bikeway, that facility will still exist. So there'll still be a really major improvement north of the airport, regardless of the alignment.
This is John Brazil. Can I add something to that?
Of course. This is John with the City of San Jose. Feel free, John.
So regarding the last question, cities also have bike plans. And so don't think that this multi-city kind of regional conceptual planning effort is the only network of bikeways. Cities have bike plans, and San Jose just adopted a new bike plan, and almost all of these alternatives identified in VTA's plan for this cross-county project are also in the city's bike plan for San Jose, and that plan focuses on building all ages and abilities, low-stress networks. So while they may not get built by VTA or be the preferred alignment, cities may be building.
That's a great point. Thanks for adding that, John. Would any of our other partners like to add or share, speak up, either the county or Santa Clara on that idea as well? You don't have to, just throwing it out there. Okay. Did we, why don't we go for a show of hands? Would anyone else like to raise their hand? Nope. Okay. Do we have any more written questions today, Libby? All right, we've gotten through most of them. Sounds like all of them. Wow. This has been super helpful. Hopefully it's been very informative for all the participants today. It's great to see all the polling information come back and to visually think about all of your preferences and where you would like to ride in the county and how you would like to get there. And hopefully provide a little joy maybe one day while you get to do that. We're always trying to improve our efforts in this really tough time, this pandemic that we're all living through right now. And we really want to do a good job at connecting with the community. So if you all have any other suggestions or ways for us to talk about the project or who to talk to, Ken provided some ideas earlier about surveying and connecting with particular groups. We appreciate that, Ken. Thank you. Feel free to share that with us.
So also our partners, Meta and the Bike Coalition, are hosting virtual pop-ups. So if you know of any local groups that are having virtual meetings, we would love to come and sort of walk folks through a little bit briefer version of this presentation and get people connected to the survey. So we're really interested in reaching out and trying to attend any other existing community group meetings that are happening. So we'd love to get, if you have anything to share or meetings that you know of coming up, someone from our team would be happy to join one of those meetings and talk with your members. So please feel free to share that either in the Q&A box, or I'm going to go to the next slide, which has an email that you could send to. This will go to Brent and Karen, right?
Yep, or one of Karen's teammates. We're willing to assist. We answer our hotline during business hours and our email as well. We can easily get back to you in the next business day. And our website has, again, all of these presentation materials on it, should you like to share them. We also have some simplified flyers as well, if you want to print those out in 8x11 and give those to people physically, or share them or post them yourselves. Our survey is also has a direct link on the project webpage that you see here, and that's a very shareable thing as well. So I think with that, we'll wrap it up today. We have another meeting tomorrow night. So if you are interested in attending both, I just wanted to note that the content will be the same between both meetings. You're of course welcome to join again, as the climate's always a little bit different at each meetings. But we will have one other opportunity to provide some live feedback tomorrow starting at 6 p.m. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, teammates,
Thanks, everybody.
team members.